Today, we honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm excited to have three of our amazing student-athlete leaders, Michelle, Sydney, and De'Eric, discuss race and social justice in 2020. De'Eric, can you reflect on some of the things that you learned last year?
Yeah, for me, I think it opened a lot of people's eyes. I think it opened a lot of people's eyes as far as that we know we have a long way to go as a country and as a society to get that full equality and everything. And I just think that I know for me that it kind of brought me back. You know, it brought me back to what can I do? How can this still be happening and things like that? And I think it opened a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah. I have several conversations about this, and I wouldn't have considered myself an activist prior to 2020. So I definitely learned a lot about the topic and what it means to represent a community. And I felt myself pushed into this position and grateful to take it on and really represent who my fellow student athletes are and what they need in during this time. And it definitely, again, opened my eyes, like De'Eric was saying, to what was happening around me and how it was affecting me and my fellow student athletes.
I have to agree with everything that people said before. I just think that the nationwide reckoning that occurred and just the lack of education that existed among the white community and people really who had to look to their Black brothers and sisters and put themselves in a position that they didn't already understand, and the education that needed to happen and is definitely ongoing and is still so far away. But I feel like that was the most important thing that stood out to me in the past year. And steps were taken, but obviously there's still a lot more that need to be made.
So all three of you mentioned about how a lot of things came to light in 2020, and especially being student athlete leaders. You know, what was it like for you three being a student athlete and also having to deal with the social injustice happening in our country?
I would say it was tough. You know, it was a lot going on, obviously, happening to people that look just like me and a lot of others on my team. So just thinking about stuff like that, having to come to your phone and see videos on social media, but also having to, you know, lock in and focus on the game or practice and things like that. And I think it was something bigger going on in the world that we need to focus on. You know, so I think it was tough, but at the end of the day, I'm glad that we got the opportunity to even, you know, have a season and learn a lot of things that a lot of people didn't know about first. So I think it was ended up being positive.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that one of the things that stood out was definitely how much support we got in terms of people who did not look like us or identify with the Black community. They still wanted to learn and see what can we do to help. This is amazing what's happening, and in terms of like the rallying and this community coming together. So how can we educate ourselves and how can you help us do that? And so I found myself kind of battling those two sides of focusing again on my athletic responsibilities and altering friendships and relationships with others around me, building new ones and things of that sort. So it was a lot on the mental capacity, but I am grateful that we have an amazing support staff in our athletic department that was there to help us develop the tools and the resources that we needed to kind of get through that.
Michelle, you mentioned having such a great support system, and you're a student athlete. All three of you are student athlete leaders, and you have huge platforms that you're able to, you know, use your voice on. How were you guys able to do that during 2020 to really amplify the voices of, you know, Black people in America?
I would say that we were relatively lucky in that sense because we had this great support within our own athletic department, people that wanted to help us use our voice and then teach us how to use it correctly. And so just using our platforms to organize, first off, right, to educate one another. It's not just important to educate those that want to learn, but also your peers and people in our own community of how can we make sure that change is being made effectively and lasting change at that. So I think that is probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned throughout this entire process.
De'Eric, what about you? I saw you on social media for multiple interviews, whether it be for our own platforms here, but then also for our conference platform as well. How were you able to use your voice to your advantage to spread the news and educate people?
Yeah, I think that's important just speaking up for the things that you believe in, and speaking about things because a lot of people don't have a voice to use. And I think me being a quarterback at University of Miami, I had to use it in a positive way. And like Michelle said, that we had Coach Diaz and Blake James and other people around the building that were supporting us in every single way. And they were giving us the resources to be successful and just to have our voice heard. Oftentimes, student athletes, they don't feel like they have a voice in a lot. But I think this year it kind of opened a lot of people's eyes that we really do have a voice and we can make a change. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of be that leader in that sense and speak out about certain things. And I could have done more. But it's going to continue. It's not going to stop right here. I'm going to keep going and trying to shed light on the situation.
And Derek, we have great allies on campus. We have student athletes like Michelle, implementing great groups like the Black Student Athlete Alliance. And then you also had the opportunity this year to place social justice messages on your jerseys and or helmets. What was that like this year, being able to put something so strong and dominant on, your helmet and your jersey that's seen by many viewers all across the world?
Yeah, I thought that was really important. That's one of the things that I had told my coach that I wanted to do, was put Black Lives Matter on the back of my helmet. What better way to show your support for a certain organization and show what you believe in than doing it on national television every Saturday. I think we had 4 or 5 primetime games, and I think we had over 1 million viewers on each of those games. So, like I said, I thought that was really important just to speak out for people that don't have as big a voice as I do. Just me playing in front of a lot of people. I thought that was the right way to send a message. So I was really proud of that. And a bunch of my teammates had it as well. It wasn't just me. So that was a real big deal for us this year.
I kind of want to highlight really quick the sacrifice that was made, I guess, for football players specifically, because of their platform and their loudness of their presence, and that there was a lot to give personally and emotionally in order to support a group like Black Lives Matter or the movement or whatever their space was. So I just want to commend those players for doing that and knowing that there might be backlash that was not positive. And so we fellow student athletes saw that and we supported, and it's just another bump in this road and another relevance for what is happening.
And Sydney, you're a strong student athlete leader on this campus, and you're here having this kind of conversation with all of us today on the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King. How have you been able to be such a strong ally for your student athletes on campus?
Something that's, I think, unique to the swimming world is that it's an incredibly non-diverse sport, which is, it's not very common in the world of sport now. I feel like sport is so diverse and so inclusive. But swimming still remains a very non-diverse sport. But I think we're really lucky, and I find myself very blessed to be at this university because we actually do have one of the most diverse swim teams I've ever been a part of and I've ever seen. And so I think that it's so important to be able to, 1, recognize that, 2, be able to notice how everybody is different and how our different voices, backgrounds, and perspectives are able to contribute to not only the team and the culture of the team, but what our team is able to do. This year has really shown the strength of the athlete voice, not just the student athlete, not just at the collegiate NCAA level, but in all professional sports as well. We're seeing messages that are being sent and people are hearing them. And I think that's incredibly important and incredibly important to recognize and to be in a position to be able to leverage that. And so I think that an example of just that's so important to be an ally is to recognize those opportunities. Earlier this year, there was an ACC, they put together an event for Unity and they needed different student athletes. And so I'm always like the type of person like, can I please go do anything and everything to help? But sometimes you have to be able to take a step back. And my perspective is obviously very different than a Black student athlete perspective. You need to be able to understand what voices need to be heard at each moment and who the best person is for each space. And so being able to recognize my fellow student athletes, my peers, and promote diverse and inclusive spaces is so incredibly important.
Today, as we celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, how do you plan on doing that, even though we're maybe indoors or in the house or away from each other and not able to celebrate as a group? What are you going to do individually to celebrate his life?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that Dr. King Jr. really emphasized was his ability to get people in this space in a peaceful way. And so I think that is one of the key terms when it comes to handling an issue that is this sensitive and this important. And so I want to pass that message on as student athletes. He also supported athletes in general on every level, using their voice, especially in the Olympics. And that moment of John Carlos just standing with his fist up and you knowing that could jeopardize his stance, and it did. And so you see athletes on their various levels really going above and beyond to use their voice. And so I really want to take that piece that he was speaking of peaceful protest and transfer it into, okay, what can athletes do while in college and then after? And so that's like a really big part of what I plan to focus on.
Yeah, I plan to focus on just going over his teaching. I think everything he stood for was so amazing, so great. He's probably one of the best leaders of all time to ever walk this earth. So just going over his teaching, what he believed in, and how he thought things should get done. And like Michelle said, that he supported athletes on every single level, pros, college, high school, didn't matter. He believed it was important for us to speak out about what we believed in. So that's how I plan on spending my day.
I read Dr. Martin Luther King's Where Do We Go From Here? It started as a speech, and then he wrote a full book about it. And I was just struck by how relevant it is. He wrote it 60 years ago, and just the relevance of the things that he laid out of where do we go from here and what steps do we need to take. And so much of it still rings true even today. So honing in on his message of being peaceful, but standing firm in what you believe in and being able to amplify voices is something that I really plan to focus on going forward in this year.
Thank you, Michelle, Sydney, and De'Eric, for taking the time to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Thank you so much for having us. It was amazing to be able to speak among this group. And I know that we all look forward to sharing this holiday with our peers and our fellow student athletes. I also want to leave with a quote from Martin Luther King. He said, "The price that this nation must pay are the continued oppression and exploitation of the Negro or any other minority is the price of its own destruction." And I think that serves a great purpose in speaking that loud, especially from the events that happened recently.